As Anderson et al. States, the Photovoice method is an increasingly used qualitative research method aiming to empower community members to document and share their stories and communicate their situations and experiences, as I will be doing for you today. Budding et al. Explained that Photovoice was discovered by Caroline Wang and Marianne Burris with the end goal to enable people to record and reflect their community strengths and concerns, to promote critical dialogue and knowledge about important issues through small group discussions of photographs, and to reach policymakers. Photovoice's intention is to foster change. In relation with Anderson et al., me telling my story in visual and verbal medium is a good fit with traditional Indigenous practices of storytelling and art, creating space and scope for Indigenous ways of knowing and being and doing to more manifestly guide research processes. Photovoice also builds on Frere's methods of empowerment and education, with one main element being the acquisition of knowledge that the participants collectively produce by reflecting on and discussing community issues. I will be walking into worlds, Indigenous and Western, with assessment and evaluation. Budding et al. Explains Photovoice is able to voice and represent individual perceptions. This is an essential element of Photovoice process and is often associated with empowerment. My journey with assessment looks different in both worlds. When we look at the Indigenous world, it's more holistic. When we look at the four colors in the four quadrants, it represents mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional, and they are all interconnected. We also understand that everyone is equal and no one is better than the next. We all work together. When I look at my Western assessment and evaluation, this was more of a hierarchical lens. Everything I had did was was through a colonial lens and was written, where we learned and got assessed through that Western ideals, telling the students who they wanted them to be and assessing their personality to fit their world. When we look at these quadrants, first we're going to look at yellow, and this represents physical, but also is in relation with birth and childhood and the season spring. And if on the left here we see sweetgrass, we see a powwow dancer in the middle, and we see a sweat lodge on the right. This is all to do with, I don't like the word assessment and evaluation, but this is part of, our growth from childhood to adulthood and so on and so forth. But just for instance, for assessment and evaluation, just for referencing this project, we're going to look at the powwow dancer in the middle. And when you're at a young age, you don't receive those feathers. You go through assessment and evaluation from knowledge carriers and elders, and you have to do those proper practices and protocols to receive those feathers. Same with picking medicine and prepping for ceremony. There's a lot of different things to do with growth and development and assessing these individuals through a Western or Indigenous lens. Moving forward, we got red, and this is in relation to, as you see there with the photo on the middle on the bottom there, it has to do with our mind and the mental aspect of who we are as an individual, and our assessment through that. And this is also in relation with our teenagerhood and the season summer. So there's a lot of different things that we do for mental assessment or mental clarity, and this is burning sage as well as braiding sweetgrass and understanding those teachings behind it. As you see on the left here, we have braided sweetgrass, but also connection with the land, and that helps our mind. We understand that everything's connected, and there's reasons why the land does its different things through seasonal change or what have you, and we understand that, and we grow and we get assessed to better acknowledge these practices and protocols. Next, we have black. This could also be blue or green, and this has to do with emotional and adulthood, weather autumn, our season autumn, and when we think of emotional, we have a lot of not dealings, but we're always with our family and friends to get our emotional support, our assessment, how we should be as a respectful, humble individual, and that comes with that teaching in the middle here. The TP teaching has a lot of different teachings when we set up and take down, and at a certain age, that's when we understand, when we're able to do this, and this teaches us humility, respect, compassion, and that's a big thing here. As you can see on the bottom left, we work and lead with our hearts. We understand that we have to lead with compassion and support each other, because there is space for us all, and this deals with assessment and growing and moving forward. Lastly, we have spirituality, and this is our elderhood as we see on the left here, and this has a lot, and the season in relation to this is winter, and again these are all interconnected and related, and what have you. And when we think of spirituality, we look at the middle there of the sweat lodge where we call in our ancestors, and there's different protocols and practices that we have to do through our years, whether we get to sing or be that medicine man or shaman, or if we're just setting up the sweat lodge or what have you. Our spirituality with our connection with land, we understand we are one in the same things. We when there's effects to the land, it affects who we are, because that's what we depend on. That is our classroom, and what have you. Top right, we have a feast, so there's a lot of people that eat together, and this is ceremony, and this helps with our spirituality and passing on those stories for the next generation to be better than the previous. Not better, but just a little bit more support, because we understand that it's not changing. When we look at Western assessment, it looks completely different. There is more individuality, as we see with the gold stars, and this visibly showcases hierarchy, making students feel less than. Why can't I catch up to Johnny? What have you? Another piece that I had seen, and everything that we did was in cursive or written, as you see in the back, and we got graded on this, whether it was satisfactory, was sad, or happy with our writing. And this was new to me. This was a different understanding of written work and what writing looks like. I was used to printing, not cresyllabics, but printing, and this was a big change. As I got older, I seen different evaluation and assessment, but most of the time it was individual evaluation. Whether it be through essay or long answer writing, multiple choice, or evaluation of Western professionalism through the teacher's lens, which was usually a white individual. Then we had personality tests explaining who we are. I always found this a little weird. I knew who I was and where I come from. And this leads to kids losing their sense of belonging. And those who are new to their indigeneity, this could lead to the false identity of, what is a good personality, or what are the attributes of personality through for an Indigenous person, but also professionalism for an Indigenous person. What are we looking at professionalism of Indigenous people? It's whose lens are we looking at? As we see there, adjusted to the school culture. What is a school culture? I'm pretty sure it's not an Indigenous lens of a school's culture when we're at these Western ideals of assessment and curricula. Going further into assessment through a Western lens, and as I entered university, I was now being assessed by people with degrees, certification, doctorates, and more. This happens as we move through the hierarchy scale, always proving who knows more and how credentials are pivotal. This is all too familiar all over the world, where people are getting these credentials and these understandings through schools, but are all these schools taking into account of indigenous or different worldviews? I think a lot of it's through that colonial British lens, of European lens of understanding. All of this Western and colonial lenses in line with the European structures, such as the British law, and is on top of the hierarchy scale, as we see here. It's a chess game, and the British colonial European lens is winning. That is the goal, and as stated on the Government of Canada website, the goal and law of Canada is that every child must get an education. And we see this in the previous slides, that education doesn't fit the needs of Indigenous people. So what education are they talking about? The website also states that Canada doesn't have a federal or national system or department for education. But Indigenous peoples, as in the Indian Act, are under the federal government when it comes to education and funding. So it's tough to comprehend that when it's different for non-Indigenous to Indigenous peoples when it comes to education systems, assessment, evaluation, because we are under a different lens than non-Indigenous people. And this has resulted in a loss of land, language, racism, and disempowerment resulting from British colonization. Society has made us become like robots, trying to be the biggest fish and not supporting each other to be good and great. As Budding et al. Explains, empowerment can encompass a change in how participants engage with their surroundings. This is to say that their access to and use of resources and information and potential of social relations and networks. We have to be better to inform people how Indigenous ways of knowing and being are being implemented in assessment and evaluation. But that's tough when you're non-Indigenous, because you need that lived experience to really understand how to pass on these teachings, how to assess and what have you, if they're ready, if they're not, and so on and so forth. And that you find this divide between Western and Indigenous ideals. We must cross the street and acknowledge that every child matters, who they are, where they come from, their culture, beliefs, protocols, practices. This Every Child Matters kind of awareness was started in 2013 to bring awareness for residential schools and support Indigenous youth and in education. There was a day created for this. This was September 30th. And this was just another day along with Indigenous Day where, it acknowledged and created space to understand Canada's history towards Indigenous peoples. Is it enough? No, it's not enough. Black History Month, we see it. We don't have a European month. That's kind of an everyday thing, but it's kind of ongoing joke. Moving forward, in 2015, there has been some policy changes because we see that there is no sense of belonging with Indigenous peoples and for the youth. So in 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada brought forth the 94 calls to action, and within there's education. And these 94 calls to action are actionable policy recommendations meant to aid the healing process in two ways: acknowledging the full horrifying history of residential school systems and creating systems to prevent these abuses from ever happening again in the future. It's not as severe as residential schools, but still these kids are struggling. Indigenous youth are struggling, like myself. While all young people face challenges associated with unprecedented environmental, social, and technological change, Indigenous youth people face additional challenges stemming from the impacts of colonization, intergenerational trauma, racism, and socioeconomic disadvantages. So, they have these policies, but we still see these effects of assessment and evaluation through a Western colonial lens. We have to work together. We have to be equal. We have to be balanced. Those Indigenous and Western ideals, diversity of contributions from those within the community, and emphasizes co-learning between community and researchers, leading to positive and sustainable actionable outcomes within and for our communities. That's what we want to see, is sustainable, actionable outcomes that supports both Indigenous and Western. These are my ideals, and we need to see more change that is balanced as we move forward in a good way, so we can have peace and prosperity for both understandings and ways of knowing and being. That is my Photovoice presentation for you guys. Here are my resources. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye.